Let me see your papers right now.
Excuse me, I'm a licensed pharmacist. I work here.
I don't care what you claim to be. Show me your identification and proof of citizenship. Citizen.
Officer, I'm an American citizen. I was born in Houston, Texas. This is harassment.
The metallic clack echoed sharply through the pharmacy, loud enough to turn heads even over the low hum of refrigeration units and the soft beeping of a prescription timer. At exactly 3:47 p.m. on a Wednesday afternoon, the sound of steel meeting steel cut through the air as Officer Daniel Morrison's handcuffs snapped shut. Morrison's BWC 300 body camera captured his own hands in frame, fingers tense, knuckles whitening as he locked the cuffs. Across the counter, Vanessa Cole's shoulders stiffened, her breath catching audibly on the audio feed. The store's overhead Hikvision CCTV camera recorded the wider scene, 3 customers frozen mid-step, a technician clutching a clipboard, fluorescent lights reflecting off white tile floors. From Officer Liam Brennan's body camera at a side angle, Vanessa's face was visible, confusion giving way to disbelief. "I'm not resisting," she said, her voice steady but strained. "Officer, this is completely unnecessary." Morrison didn't respond right away. His radio crackled softly at his shoulder, dispatch chatter bleeding into the moment. The temperature outside was 92 degrees, but inside the pharmacy the air conditioning blew cold, raising goosebumps along Vanessa's arms beneath her white pharmacist coat. At 3:47 and 12 seconds p.m., Brennan's camera picked up Morrison muttering, "You should have just given me your papers," as he guided Vanessa away from the counter. 3 months later, in a courtroom packed with reporters and quiet anticipation, the jury foreperson would stand and read a number that would ripple far beyond this small suburban city. But in this moment, captured simultaneously by 2 body cameras and 4 ceiling-mounted security cameras, none of that was visible yet. What was visible was a licensed medical professional being led away from her own workplace, her credentials still hanging framed on the wall behind her. Before we go any further, take a moment and tell us where you're watching from. If this is your first time here, make sure you subscribe. Stories like this, stories inspired by documented cases and real constitutional questions, don't reach people unless you help share them. By staying through this video, you'll see how a routine afternoon escalated, how the Fourth Amendment is supposed to work in everyday life, and what happens when accountability finally arrives. This isn't just about one stop or one arrest. It's about understanding your rights, recognizing abuse of authority, and seeing how the legal system can respond when those rights are violated. Vanessa Cole had been a pharmacist for nearly 16 years by the time Officer Morrison walked into Cole Family Pharmacy at 3:42 p.m. Her Texas license, number RPH TX 884291, was displayed prominently behind the counter alongside her Doctor of Pharmacy degree from the University of Houston. She'd moved to the city 8 years earlier to take over the small independent pharmacy her uncle had opened in the early 1990s. Patients knew her by name. Some had been filling prescriptions with her for over a decade. She volunteered twice a month at a free medical clinic on Cedar Avenue and had received a Local Health Coalition award just the year before. On that afternoon, Vanessa wore her standard white coat over a navy blouse, her name stitched in blue thread above the pocket. At 3:41 p.m., the pharmacy's entrance camera recorded her laughing softly with a customer as the bell chimed and 2 uniformed officers stepped inside. Morrison entered first, badge number 4729 visible on his chest, followed by Officer Liam Brennan, badge number 5183, whose body camera angle stayed slightly off to the left. The time stamp glowed in the corner of all feeds, Wednesday, March 13, 2024. Officer Daniel Morrison was in his 9th year with the Brookside Police Department. His personnel file listed 6 prior civilian complaints, 4 for discourtesy, 2 for unlawful detention, all deemed not sustained. Supervisors described him as proactive and assertive. Brennan, by contrast, had just under 3 years on the force and was still considered a probationary officer. He'd been assigned to Morrison for field guidance. The call that brought them there came in at 3:29 p.m. Dispatch logs later described it as an anonymous tip reporting a suspicious person refusing to show identification at a pharmacy. No crime was alleged. No description of illegal activity was provided. The temperature outside hovered in the low 90s, heat shimmering above asphalt in the parking lot as Morrison's patrol car pulled in at 3:41 and 36 seconds p.m., dashboard camera recording the storefront. Inside, Vanessa looked up as Morrison approached the counter. Brennan's camera captured the initial exchange clearly. "Afternoon," Morrison said. "We got a call about someone matching your description." Vanessa blinked. "My description? I work here. I'm the pharmacist on duty." Morrison leaned his elbows on the counter, his body camera dipping slightly. "I'm going to need to see your ID." At 3:42 and 18 seconds p.m., the overhead CCTV showed Vanessa gesturing calmly toward the framed documents behind her. "My license is right there." "What's this about?" Morrison shook his head. "I want a government-issued ID. Now." The lighting was harsh, fluorescent bulbs buzzing faintly. Brennan's camera caught Vanessa taking a measured breath. "Officer, am I being detained? What crime am I suspected of?" Morrison's jaw tightened. The audio picked up the faint squeak of his boots against tile as he shifted his stance. Under the Fourth Amendment, a police officer needs reasonable, articulable suspicion that a crime has occurred, is occurring, or is about to occur to detain an individual. That legal principle, first articulated in Terry v. Ohio, would soon become central to everything that followed. At 3:42 and 41 seconds p.m., Vanessa cited it aloud. "With respect, under the Fourth Amendment and Terry v. Ohio, you need reasonable suspicion to detain me. What crime do you believe I've committed?" Brennan's camera recorded Morrison exhaling sharply. "You're obstructing my investigation." "I'm asking a lawful question," Vanessa replied, her voice steady. "I'm happy to cooperate with lawful requests." The store's rear camera captured customers exchanging uneasy glances. A technician stepped back from the counter, hands clasped. The temperature inside felt suddenly colder, the air conditioning humming loudly in the silence between words. At 3:43 p.m., Morrison reached for his radio. "Dispatch, confirm caller still on the line," he said. Static answered back. "Negative. Caller disconnected." Morrison's body camera captured the moment his expression hardened. "Ma'am, if you don't produce ID, I will detain you." Vanessa folded her hands on the counter, a subtle tremor visible from Brennan's side-angle camera. "Officer, I'm an American citizen born in Dallas, Texas. My credentials are displayed. I have committed no crime." The confrontation escalated over the next 4 minutes, each second preserved across multiple angles. Morrison's camera showed his hand resting near his cuffs. Brennan's camera recorded Vanessa's controlled posture, shoulders squared despite the tension. The store's entrance camera showed the afternoon sun slanting through the glass doors, dust motes floating in the light. At 3:46 and 50 seconds p.m., Morrison made his decision. "Turn around," he said. "For what?" Vanessa asked. "For failing to identify." The legal basis for such a demand was thin at best. In this jurisdiction, there was no stop and identify statute applicable absent lawful detention. Vanessa remained still. "I do not consent to any detention," she said quietly. The sound of cuffs closing followed seconds later. As Morrison guided her from behind the counter, Brennan's camera captured his own hesitation, a brief glance toward Morrison, then back to Vanessa. The overhead CCTV recorded a customer pulling out a phone, though no footage from that device would later surface. At 3:49 p.m., Vanessa was led through the front doors into the heat. The parking lot camera showed her squinting against the sun, sweat beading at her hairline almost instantly. The patrol car door opened with a hollow thunk. The backseat camera recorded her sitting carefully, hands cuffed in front, breathing slowly. "I want to speak to my attorney," she said at 3:49 and 38 seconds p.m. Morrison closed the door without replying. The ride to the precinct took 12 minutes. Inside the car, the air was stale and warm despite the AC. Vanessa stared straight ahead, the reflection of the metal partition visible in her eyes on the dash cam. Morrison's body camera captured him filling out a digital arrest form on his console, charge listed as obstruction without violence. At 4:02 p.m., they arrived at Brookside Police Department headquarters. The booking area was lit by harsh white lights, the smell of disinfectant heavy in the air. Vanessa was fingerprinted, photographed, and asked to surrender her personal effects. Her watch was placed in a clear plastic bag. The cuffs were removed at 4:11 p.m., red marks visible on her wrists in Brennan's camera footage. She was released on her own recognizance at 7:18 p.m., nearly 4 hours after the initial contact. The charge would be reviewed by the city prosecutor within days. 5 days after her release, Vanessa sat at her kitchen table, laptop open, watching the body camera footage provided through a public records request. The timestamps told a story that aligned disturbingly well across angles. At 3:42 p.m., no crime. At 3:47 p.m., an arrest. 3 weeks later, an email arrived from civil rights attorney Marcus Hale, a 22-year veteran litigator affiliated with the State Justice Alliance. "I've reviewed the footage," he wrote. "We need to talk." Meanwhile, back at the precinct, Morrison's supervisors conducted an internal review. Brennan was interviewed at 9:14 a.m. on April 2, his statement recorded in an interview room with beige walls and a single ceiling camera. He described feeling uneasy but deferring to Morrison's experience. By the time the city prosecutor formally declined to pursue charges on April 9, citing insufficient evidence and constitutional concerns, Vanessa's case had already taken on a life of its own. And this was only the beginning. 3 weeks after Marcus Hale first reached out, Vanessa found herself seated in a quiet conference room on the 15th floor of a downtown office building overlooking the river. The windows let in pale morning light, muted by overcast skies and a steady drizzle tapping against the glass. It was 9:06 a.m. on Monday, April 22, 2024. A digital recorder sat between her and Hale on the polished wood table, its red light blinking softly. Hale had been practicing civil rights law for over 20 years, most of it spent litigating Fourth Amendment violations and police misconduct cases. He spoke calmly, methodically, as he pulled up synchronized video feeds on his laptop. Morrison's body camera on the left. Brennan's on the right. The pharmacy's overhead CCTV in a smaller window below. "The timeline is clean," Hale said, tapping the spacebar to pause the footage at 3:42 and 18 seconds p.m. No reasonable suspicion. No probable cause. No stop and identify authority. And yet, he advanced the video 6 minutes forward, stopping again at the moment the cuffs closed. An arrest. Vanessa watched her own image on the screen, hands folded, posture composed. "I kept thinking," she said quietly, "if I stay calm, this will end." Hale nodded. "You did exactly what courts expect of a reasonable person." 2 days later, Hale filed a notice of claim with the city, preserving Vanessa's right to sue under 42 U.S.C. Section 1983 for violations of her 4th and 14th Amendment rights. The case number, CV 2024-003847, would soon appear on motions, filings, and eventually, national legal blogs. The city's response came on May 6 at 4:17 p.m., a denial of liability. That denial triggered the next phase. Discovery began in early June. Morrison and Brennan were ordered to preserve all body camera footage, dispatch audio, and patrol vehicle recordings. Subpoenas were issued for the pharmacy's Hikvision CCTV system data, which included 4 angles: entrance, counter, prescription area, and rear aisle. A forensic analyst synchronized every feed down to the second, aligning them with dispatch timestamps and arrest logs. At 2:14 p.m. on June 18, Hale sat with Vanessa as they reviewed deposition excerpts from Officer Morrison. On screen, Morrison sat rigidly in a beige conference room, his own attorney beside him. "Why did you demand identification?" Hale asked in the recorded deposition. Morrison shifted. "Officer safety." "What specific threat did Ms. Cole pose at 3:42 p.m.? "I believed she was being evasive." "Evasive about what?" Morrison paused. The camera angle caught a bead of sweat sliding down his temple. "Her identity." The silence that followed lasted nearly 8 seconds. When Brennan's deposition followed a week later, the contrast was stark. At 10:33 a.m. on June 25, Brennan admitted he never observed Vanessa commit a crime. "I didn't think we had grounds," he said, eyes downcast. But Officer Morrison was lead. Meanwhile, the city filed a motion for summary judgment, invoking qualified immunity. Their argument hinged on the claim that Morrison made a reasonable mistake of law. Hale's response brief, filed July 9 at 11:58 p.m., dismantled that claim line by line, citing Terry v. Ohio, Brown v. Texas, and multiple circuit precedents establishing that refusal to provide ID absent lawful detention is not a crime. As the case moved toward trial, public interest grew. Vanessa returned to work after a short closure, greeted by handwritten notes taped to the pharmacy door. "We stand with you. Thank you for standing up. At the midpoint of this story, it's worth asking, should officers be allowed to demand identification without reasonable suspicion? This isn't just about one pharmacist in one city. It's about whether the Fourth Amendment's protection against unreasonable seizures applies equally to everyone. Comment below with what you think. The trial began on a cold Monday morning, January 13, 2025, at the county courthouse on Jefferson Avenue. Snow dusted the steps outside. Inside courtroom 4B, the air smelled faintly of old wood and paper. Judge Eleanor Watkins presided, her voice measured as she addressed the jury. Opening statements began at 9:22 a.m. Hale stood first. "This case is about limits," he said. "Limits on government power. Limits drawn clearly by the Constitution." The defense argued order and compliance, framing Morrison's actions as proactive policing. But the evidence told a different story. On the second day of trial, at 10:41 a.m., the courtroom lights dimmed as body camera footage was played on a large screen. Morrison's camera angle filled the room. The timestamp glowed unmistakably in the corner. Jurors leaned forward. Some shook their heads. When the cuffs clicked shut on screen, the metallic sound echoed through the courtroom speakers, sharper than anyone expected. Vanessa testified the following afternoon. At 2:18 p.m., she took the stand, hands folded just as they had been behind the pharmacy counter months earlier. "I believed in the system," she said, voice steady but emotional. "I believed that if I followed the law, I would be protected by it." Expert witnesses followed. Dr. Alan Pierce, a constitutional law professor from Northwestern University, testified at 11:03 a.m. on day 4. "There was no lawful basis for this detention," he said plainly. None. The defense attempted to undermine Vanessa's credibility. It failed. Closing arguments concluded on January 21 at 3:56 p.m. The jury deliberated for just under 6 hours. At 6:12 p.m., they returned. The verdict was unanimous. The courtroom was silent as the foreperson spoke. Liability was found on all counts. Compensatory damages were set at $6.4 million. Punitive damages, $9.5 million. Vanessa covered her mouth, tears spilling freely. Hale exhaled, eyes closing briefly. Total award, $15.9 million. In the weeks that followed, Officer Morrison was terminated after an internal affairs review cited policy violations and dishonesty during deposition. The department announced mandatory Fourth Amendment training, revised stop and identify protocols, and new supervisory review requirements. Vanessa established the Coles Civil Liberties Fund later that year, providing legal education grants to healthcare professionals. She testified before a state legislative committee in October, her case cited repeatedly in police training seminars. Today, her story is taught not as an anomaly, but as a lesson. If you believe that constitutional rights mean something, that standing up for them should never be punished, make sure you're subscribed and notifications are on. Tomorrow, we bring you another story inspired by documented cases, where accountability was demanded and justice answered. Because the truth, captured through cameras and tested in court, reminds us that the power of government comes from the people, not the other way around.